Welcome to Chapter 9. On the website, I had said it was Chapter 10. If you saw that, that was my error. Chapter 9 is the chapter in the new textbook. It was the same information as was in Chapter 10 of the previous book. So we're going to be talking about patterns of inheritance. How do genes and chromosomes pass down their information from parent to child? So genetics, that's basically what we're looking at now, is looking at heredity. How is information passed down from mom and dad to child? An example on the slide is purebred dogs. They're exactly like their parents. But once you start mixing different types of dogs, you're going to have a mutt. And those actually technically are often healthier than the dogs of purebred dogs, because there is inbreeding, and as soon as you start inbreeding, genetic disorders can become more prevalent. So when we're looking at a dog's behavior, or ours too, you're looking not only at genes, you're going to look at the environment too, because there's a huge influence of the environment, diet, what's outside, the sun, and it can influence our genes. So we have to start from the beginning, though, for you to understand heredity, which is actually the passing down of traits. Traits are characteristics like brown hair, blue eyes, all those things are traits, and you have obviously thousands of different traits, and heredity is looking at how that is passed from one generation to the next. Now, this work was all started by a monk named Gregor Mendel. And he started his work in the 1860s. He actually grew up on a farm, and he had done a lot of mathematical analysis of different plants, and he was trying to figure out what was passed down from parent to child, and so on. And when he started to do this study, he did not know genes existed, didn't know chromosomes existed. None of that had been discovered yet. So he did most of this by mathematical analysis and visual. And he used garden pea plants because, first, they're very easy to grow. They have many different kinds of traits that he could play with, like color, height, leaf position, and they are easily manipulated. You'll see how he manipulated the passing on of traits from one generation to the next. And the one thing that these plants can do is they can self-fertilize. In other words, they have male and female parts in their makeup. So here is a picture of a pea plant, and you can see, of course, the petals, and they come in different colors, and that's one of the traits we're going to look at. But deep inside are the stamen, which have the little yellow thing at the end. That's pollen, and that is the sperm producing pollen. And then inside there is one larger carpel, and that produces the eggs. So you need the pollen to fertilize the plant. And what Mendel did, he actually made the plants just one gender. He cut off the stamen so that he was able to manipulate what sperm fertilized the plant. There's a picture coming up of this. Okay, a couple of words, and you're going to see there's a lot of terminology in this chapter. There was a lot introduced in the previous chapter, and they sort of continue on through. So a trait is something you inherit that is a feature, like eye color, finger length, the way your fingers are. How long are they? Are they long and skinny or short and not that skinny? So there's many, many traits that we all have. That's why we're all so different from each other. Now Mendel, what he did is, the term true breeding means purebred. It's the same thing as a purebred dog. I had a Bichon. She just recently died, and she was a purebred dog. Purebred means that the parents had the exact same genetic material as the parents, and so they pass on the same genes. So purebred and true breeding mean the same thing, that no other species has had an influence on the traits of the plant or the dog. As soon as you get a mutt, they're not true breeding anymore. They're called hybrids. Hybrids are when you have two parents of different genetic makeup producing a child or offspring that is no longer identical to the parent or have the same traits and characteristics. It's actually a mix of the two now. Now, also, we have to keep track of the generations when we start looking at the plants. The parental generation is the first generation that we're going to be looking at, and that's called the P generation. Their offspring, which are going to be hybrids, are the F1 generation. Then there's one more cross. Cross means a mating of generations. When you mate an F1 generation with another F1 generation, you now have an F2 generation. So here's a picture of what Mendel did. Up at the top, number 1. You see his hand and the scissors there? He removed the stamens from the purple flower. So he had a field of 2 different purebred flowers. He had white in one field and purple in another field. And they never had mated together. They never had transferred the sperm or egg to each other. They were purebreds. The white always had white offspring and the purple always had purple offspring, and they were far enough apart that the pollen didn't transfer over. What he did is he did a controlled experiment, and he controlled who got the pollen. So in turn, what he did is he removed the stamens from the purple flowers, so they could no longer self-fertilize. They didn't have the male part anymore. So in order for them to create offspring, they had to get the sperm from somewhere else. So what he did is he went over to the white flowers, and he has a little brush there. That's what that picture is on the right, right above the number 2. He brushed, got pieces of the pollen, went over to the purple flower, and he brushed the pollen from the white plant onto the female part of the purple plant. So in turn, he was transferring the pollen from the white to the purple. And in turn, the purple now was pollinated, and inside the eggs matured into a pod, a pea pod, and you can see it there, number 3. Those peas are the seeds that in turn have a little embryo inside of the offspring. And what happened there is that all the plants from those seeds were planted in a new field so that there was no interference from any other genetic pool. And the offspring of this mating, with the purple with the white, that's the parental generation. The generation that we're going to be looking at is the offspring of that mating, and that is the F1 generation.
Okay, now this slide we are looking at what's on page 147 in your textbook, and these are the characteristics of the plants, or the traits, that Mendel studied and that we'll be talking about in this chapter.